He only noticed her when another man made her laugh. James Kang, who'd walked past her desk 412 times without a single glance, froze mid-stride in the glass corridor of the 18th floor, because she smiled at someone else. And in that instant, every person in Pacific Crest Enterprises understood Alex Watson had just become his obsession. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're ready for another captivating story, go ahead and click subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. I love knowing how far our stories travel and how many hearts they reach. Your support helps us bring even more thrilling tales your way, and trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, settle in. Let's begin the story. Los Angeles at dusk bleeds gold across steel. The Pacific Crest building cuts 40 stories into the skyline above Wilshire Boulevard, all dark glass and sharp angles, a monument to controlled violence dressed as commerce. Inside, everything gleams. Polished marble, chrome elevators, the kind of silence that money buys and fear maintains. And yet, amid all that cold perfection, there was a woman who went unnoticed. Alex Watson, 26, sat 3 doors down from the corner office in a cubicle that faced a wall. She kept her files organized, her coffee consistent, her head down, financial analysis, quarterly reports, data models that kept an empire running from behind the scenes, the kind of work that mattered but never got acknowledged. She'd learned early that invisibility was survival in a place like this. The 18th floor belonged to one man. James Kang didn't need a sign on his door. His presence did the talking. Former enforcer, current CEO. The kind of man whose past was whispered about in break rooms but never to his face. His tattoos ran from shoulder to wrist beneath those Tom Ford suits. His Patek Philippe cost more than a house. His eyes could cut glass when he was deciding whether someone lived or died. Alex had worked there 14 months. He'd passed her desk 412 times. Not once had he really seen her. But she'd seen him. Every morning at 8:15. Every afternoon when he stalked past. Phone pressed to ear, speaking Korean in clipped tones. She'd memorized the sharp line of his jaw, the way he moved like violence wrapped in silk. And somewhere between month 3 and month 9, Alex Watson had done something foolish. She'd fallen in love with a man who didn't know her name. That Tuesday started like any other. Alex arrived at 7:30 a.m., with coffee from downstairs medium roast, no sugar. The building was still half empty, the city outside just waking. She'd heard through the grapevine that Mr. Kang had just returned from Seoul. Business, they said. Though everyone knew his business, there had nothing to do with hotels. At 8:14 a.m., the elevator chimed. 2 men in dark suits stepped out, first security, always security. Then came him. James Kang. The air shifted. Conversations died. He moved with the kind of calm that made you forget he'd once killed men with his bare hands. His watch caught the light. His expression gave nothing away. Alex stood as he approached. "Good morning, Mr. Kang," she said softly. He walked past without a glance, eyes on his phone. It stung. It always did. But she smiled anyway and sat back down. 5 minutes later, a voice broke the tension. "Morning, Watson." Ryan Park leaned against her cubicle wall, coffee cup in hand, that easy grin that made him impossible to dislike. He worked IT second floor, but lately he'd found reasons to check equipment on 18. "You're here early," she said. "Server maintenance. Figured I'd grab coffee before chaos starts." He set a second cup on her desk. "Brought you one. Black, right?" Alex blinked. "You remembered?" "I pay attention," he grinned. "Unlike some people around here who think employees are furniture." She laughed a real laugh, small but genuine, the kind that made her shoulders relax and her eyes soften. "Ryan, you can't say that here." "Why not? It's true. You work harder than half the execs and no one says thank you." He leaned closer. "I'm just saying, someone should notice." "Well, I appreciate it," Alex said, her smile lingering. "Really? Thank you." Ryan's hand brushed hers as he passed the cup. "Anytime. You know where to find me." He stopped. Because James Kang had just stepped out of his office. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stood in the doorway, one hand against the frame, his gaze locked on them. For the first time in 14 months, James Kang saw her. The sound of her laughter, bright, unguarded, warm, hit him like a physical blow. It didn't belong here. Not in this place of steel and quiet threats. Not in his world. And it sure as hell wasn't meant for another man. From where he stood, he could see everything. Ryan Park leaning too close. Her eyes lit with something soft. The way her fingers brushed his. The intimacy. The casualness. The smile James had never earned. Something tightened in his chest, sharp, unfamiliar, irrational. Min-jun, his head of security, appeared at his elbow. "Boss?" James didn't answer. His jaw worked. "Everything all right?" Min-jun asked carefully. "No," James said quietly, his voice cold enough to frost glass. Min-jun waited. "Who is he?" "Ryan Park, IT Division, 2nd floor, clean record. Get him off this floor." Min-jun's eyes widened. "Sir?" James turned just enough to meet his gaze. "I don't want him near her desk again. Move him. Reassign him. I don't care. Just get him out of my sight." "Understood." Min-jun pulled out his phone. James looked back at Alex Watson, this woman in Navy who'd somehow become the only thing in Los Angeles he couldn't stop seeing, and felt his legendary control begin to crack. Jealousy, he was learning, didn't ask permission. Across the floor, Alex felt the weight of his stare before she saw it. When she glanced up, their eyes met for exactly 3 seconds. His expression was unreadable, cold, assessing, like he was seeing her for the first time and calculating what she was worth. Then he turned and walked back into his office, shutting the door with a controlled click that somehow felt louder than a slam. Ryan cleared his throat awkwardly. "Was that about me?" "I don't know," Alex whispered, her pulse racing for reasons she couldn't name. But she felt it, the shift in the air, the invisible line that had just been crossed. Something had changed, something dangerous. By 9 a.m., Ryan Park received notice of his immediate transfer to the downtown branch. No explanation, effective immediately. By 10 a.m., every person on the 18th floor was whispering. By noon, Alex Watson understood. She was no longer invisible. And that terrified her more than 14 months of being ignored ever had. 14 months of careful distance, of calculated invisibility, of two people existing in the same space without ever truly colliding, all of it undone by a laugh on a Tuesday afternoon. But now, in the days that followed, there was no going back. The 18th floor felt different on Wednesday. Alex arrived at her usual time, but the coffee tasted wrong. The elevator ride felt longer. When she stepped onto the floor, heads turned, brief glances, quickly averted, but she felt them. Word had spread about Ryan's abrupt transfer, and worse, people had started to guess why. She kept her head down, moved to her cubicle, and tried to disappear the way she always had. But disappearing only works when no one's looking for you. James Kang arrived at 8:15, exactly on schedule. Security first, then him, the usual routine. Except when he walked past her desk this time, he slowed. Just half a second. Just enough for his eyes to catch on her wrist as she typed the delicate turn of bone beneath skin, the silver bracelet she always wore catching morning light through the windows. He'd walked past her 413 times. This was the first time he'd noticed she wore jewelry. He hated it. Hated that he noticed. Hated that he kept walking but wanted to stop. Hated the way his chest tightened when he reached his office and could still hear the rhythm of her keystrokes through the glass wall. Control had always been his currency. The thing that separated him from the violence of his past, from the man who'd once broken bones for money and loyalty. He'd built an empire on restraint, on calculated moves, on never wanting anything he couldn't afford to lose. But wanting Alex Watson was becoming expensive. At 2:47 p.m., James did something he'd never done before. He called his executive assistant into his office. Naomi Jacob had worked for him for 3 years, efficient, discreet, smart enough to never ask questions she didn't need answers to. "I need a comprehensive review of workflow efficiency on this floor," James said, not looking up from his laptop. Naomi blinked. "Sir?" "Start with the analysts. I want to know their schedules, their project loads, their productivity patterns." He paused, fingers stilling on the keyboard. "Especially Watson. She's been here over a year. I need to ensure we're utilizing her skills appropriately." It was a lie. They both knew it. Naomi's expression remained professionally neutral. "Of course, I'll have the report by Friday." "Tomorrow?" James corrected. "And Naomi?" Discreet. She nodded, understanding more than he'd said, and left. James leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. He was studying an employee's schedule like a stalker. This was beneath him. This was weakness. But he opened his calendar anyway and started looking for patterns in when Alex took lunch, when she left for the day, when she arrived in the morning. Wednesday became a study in obsession disguised as management. Thursday afternoon, James sat in the executive conference room reviewing acquisition contracts with his legal team and Min-jun. The meeting had been going for 90 minutes. Complex clauses, international holdings, the kind of details that required absolute focus. Then, through the glass wall of the conference room, he saw Ryan Park step off the elevator. James's focus shattered like dropped crystal. Ryan had been transferred downtown. He had no reason to be on this floor. And yet there he was, coffee cup in hand, heading toward the cubicle section where Alex's desk sat. James stood mid-sentence. "Sir?" His lead attorney looked confused. "Excuse me," James said, already moving toward the door. Minjun caught his eye, recognized something dangerous there, and followed. James stepped into the corridor just as Ryan reached Alex's desk. She looked up, surprised, smiling that same easy smile that had started all of this. "Ryan? What are you?" "Mr. Park." James's voice cut across the floor like a blade through silk. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. Ryan froze, coffee cup halfway extended toward Alex. "Mr. Kang, I was just..." "Downtown. You were transferred downtown." James moved closer, each step measured, controlled, lethal. "So unless the IT infrastructure on the 18th floor has catastrophically failed in the last 48 hours, I'm curious why you're here." The air went electric. Ryan swallowed. I just wanted to say goodbye properly. We didn't get a chance." "You had a chance." James stopped 3 feet away, hands in his pockets, expression carved from ice. "It ended Tuesday. Minjun will escort you out." "Sir, I didn't mean any..." "Out." Minjun appeared at Ryan's elbow, professional but unyielding. "This way, Mr. Park." Alex watched Ryan leave, watched the entire scene unfold with a mix of confusion and something else. Something that felt dangerously like realization. When everyone returned to their work and the murmur of conversation slowly resumed, she looked up at James. Their eyes met across 15 feet of polished floor. He should have walked away, should have returned to his meeting, should have pretended this was about company policy and nothing more. Instead, he held her gaze for 5 full seconds, long enough for her to see it, the possessiveness, the jealousy, the crack in his legendary control. Then he turned and walked back into the conference room, leaving Alex staring after him with her heart racing and her hands trembling against her keyboard. Alex stayed late that Thursday, long after the floor emptied. Not because she had work, because she needed to think. The most intimidating man in Los Angeles, the CEO with a criminal past and a reputation for cold calculation, had just interrupted a meeting to remove someone from her presence, had looked at her like she mattered, like she belonged to him. It should have terrified her. It did terrify her. But something else stirred beneath the fear. Recognition. Like some part of her had been waiting 14 months for him to finally see her, and now that he had, she didn't know whether to run or stay absolutely still. She packed her laptop at 7:30 p.m. and headed for the elevator. James's office light was still on. She could see him through the glass jacket off, sleeves rolled to his elbows, tattoos finally visible like shadows beneath fabric. He was staring at his computer screen, but as she passed, his eyes lifted. For the second time that day, they looked at each other. No words, no movement, just awareness crackling between them like a live wire. The elevator chimed. Alex stepped inside. As the doors closed, she saw him stand from his desk, saw him take 1 step toward the window, watching her leave. She pressed her hand against the elevator wall to steady herself. Everything had changed, and neither of them could pretend otherwise. By Friday, the entire office knew. Not the details, no one dared ask questions, but they felt it. The tension that hummed through the 18th floor like electricity before a storm. The way James Kang's gaze would drift toward the cubicle section during phone calls. The way Alex Watson kept her eyes down but her shoulders tight, hyper-aware of being watched. Naomi delivered her efficiency report that morning. James read it alone in his office. Alex arrived at 7:30 a.m. every day, left at 6 p.m., took lunch at noon. Her productivity was exceptional. Her work flawless. She had no disciplinary issues, no complaints, no drama. She was, by every professional metric, invisible. Except she wasn't. Not anymore. James closed the folder and pressed his palms against his desk. His control, the thing he'd built his entire post-mafia life around, was fracturing. Over a woman who wore a silver bracelet and laughed at terrible jokes. A woman who'd worked 3 doors down for over a year without him caring. Until Tuesday. Until jealousy. Until he'd realized that invisibility had been protection, and he'd just stripped it away from her with his bare attention. He stood, grabbed his jacket, and walked out of his office. Alex looked up as he approached her desk. Her eyes widened slightly. "Miss Watson," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Monday morning, my office. 7 a.m. Sir? We need to discuss your role here." His jaw tightened. "Things are going to change." He didn't wait for her response, didn't explain, just walked away, leaving her sitting there with fear and anticipation warring across her face. By 5 p.m., when James left for the day, he knew the truth. The crack in his armor had become a chasm, and Alex Watson was standing on the other side, close enough to destroy everything he'd built, close enough to matter. And that made her the most dangerous person in his world. Saturday afternoon found James Kang doing something he hadn't done in years. Nothing. No meetings, no acquisition reviews, no calls to Seoul or late-night strategy sessions with Minjun, just silence in his Hancock Park home, expensive and suffocating, while his mind refused to rest. He'd told himself the weekend would provide clarity, distance, a chance to remember who he was before Tuesday, before a laugh had detonated his control like a carefully placed explosive. Instead, he sat in his home office staring at a laptop screen, realizing he'd opened the efficiency report on Alex Watson for the third time that morning. Alex arrived at 7:30 a.m. every day, left at 6 p.m., took lunch at noon. He'd memorized it, every detail, every pattern. Like he was planning an operation instead of simply losing his mind over a data analyst who wore silver bracelets and smiled at men who weren't him. James closed the laptop harder than necessary and stood. He needed air, space, anything that wasn't the walls of his home closing in while he obsessed over a woman he'd barely spoken to. He grabbed his keys and left. Los Angeles on a Saturday afternoon sprawls lazy and golden, the city breathing differently without the weekday urgency. James drove without destination, still wearing the Tom Ford suit he'd put on that morning out of habit armor even on days off. The Patek Philippe on his wrist caught sunlight as he gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. He ended up on Wilshire Boulevard. Not intentionally, not consciously. But there he was, pulling into a parking lot, staring at the red and yellow sign of a Wendy's like it held answers to questions he shouldn't be asking. It was absurd. A man in a $3,000 suit eating fast food alone on a Saturday. But the alternative was going home to that empty house, to that laptop, to the growing certainty that he was unraveling. James cut the engine and went inside. The restaurant smelled like grease and salt and something comfortingly ordinary. Families occupied booths. Teenagers clustered around tables with phones and fries. No one recognized him here. No one looked at him like he was dangerous. He ordered a Baconator from a teenager who didn't make eye contact, paid cash, and took his number to a table in the corner. Not because he was hungry, because he needed to be somewhere that wasn't soaked in his own wealth and isolation. He was staring at nothing, waiting for food he wouldn't eat, when he saw her. Alex Watson, sitting alone in a booth by the window, afternoon light streaming through glass and turning her dark skin luminous. She wore jeans and a simple white t-shirt, no office clothes, no professional armor. Her hair was down, falling past her shoulders in waves he'd never seen before because she always wore it pulled back at work. She looked younger, softer, real in a way the fluorescent-lit office never allowed. James froze. She hadn't seen him. She was reading something on her phone, a small salad in front of her barely touched, completely absorbed in whatever held her attention. And then she smiled. Not the polite office smile, not the careful expression she wore when navigating the 18th floor. A real smile, spontaneous, unguarded, lighting up her face in a way that made James's chest constrict. She was smiling at her phone, at a text, at someone who'd written something that made her happy. The jealousy hit him like a fist. Irrational, possessive, consuming. He had no right to it, no claim to her attention, her smiles, her private moments. But the feeling clawed through him anyway, sharp and undeniable. Who was making her smile like that? Ryan Park, texting from his new assignment downtown? Some friend? Someone more than a friend? James clenched his jaw so hard it ached. He should leave, should walk out before she looked up and saw him, before this chance encounter became something neither of them could explain away. But he couldn't move, couldn't stop watching her. She tucked her hair behind her ear, a gesture he'd seen her do 100 times at work, but never really noticed until this week. Her fingers moved across her phone screen, typing a response, and the smile lingered, soft and private. James memorized it all. The angle of her jaw, the way sunlight caught on her cheekbones, the unconscious grace of her movements when she thought no one was watching. The fact that she ate lunch alone, just like he did, in a Wendy's, instead of somewhere expensive and curated. The The fact that she was human in ways his world had stopped allowing. She laughed softly at something on her screen, barely audible, but he heard it across the restaurant, and James felt the betrayal of it, even though he knew how insane that was. She wasn't his. She owed him nothing. He'd spent 14 months ignoring her existence. But that was before Tuesday. Before he'd realized that invisibility had been mercy, and he'd stripped it away with his jealousy and attention. Before he'd started seeing her everywhere, even in places she had no obligation to appear. His number was called. James ignored it. Alex finished typing, set her phone down, and took a bite of her salad. She looked out the window at the traffic on Wilshire, her expression peaceful in a way he'd never seen at work. Content. Like this simple Saturday afternoon at a fast food restaurant was exactly where she wanted to be. It made him ache. Not with desire, though, that was there too, unwelcome and growing, but with something worse. Longing. For the kind of simplicity she represented. For the version of himself that might have been able to walk over to her table, sit down, and have a normal conversation without the weight of his past and his power making everything dangerous. But he wasn't that man. Would never be that man. He was James Kang, former enforcer, current criminal dressed as CEO, and everything he touched eventually bled. Alex picked up her phone again, typed something quick, and smiled once more. James stood abruptly. He walked past his unclaimed food, past the confused teenager at the counter, straight out the door into the parking lot. The sunlight felt too bright. His suit felt too tight. His skin felt like it belonged to someone else. He sat in his car, a black Mercedes S-Class that cost more than most people earned in a year, and stared at the Wendy's entrance, waiting to see her leave. Needing to know she got to her car safely, even though Los Angeles in daylight posed no threat. Even though he was the threat. 10 minutes later, Alex walked out. She was still smiling, phone in hand, completely unaware that the most dangerous man in Los Angeles had just spent 20 minutes watching her eat a salad. She got into a modest Honda Civic navy blue, a few years old, practical, and drove away. James sat in the parking lot for another 15 minutes after she left, his hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at nothing. He'd just stalked an employee to a Wendy's, watched her without her knowledge or consent, felt jealous over a smile that had nothing to do with him. This wasn't attraction. This wasn't interest. This was obsession. An obsession in his world, in his life, was the most dangerous thing he could afford, because men like him didn't get to want things without destroying them, didn't get to care without turning care into possession, didn't get to love without making love a weapon. He'd spent 14 months not seeing Alex Watson because some part of him, the part that still remembered who he'd been before the empire, before the blood had known that if he ever really looked at her, he wouldn't be able to look away. And now it was too late. Monday morning, she'd walk into his office at 7:00 a.m. for a conversation about her role, and James would have to pretend he hadn't spent Saturday memorizing the way sunlight caught her hair in a Wendy's on Wilshire Boulevard. Would have to pretend he wasn't already planning ways to keep her close, keep her visible, keep her his in ways that had nothing to do with employment and everything to do with the fact that he'd finally, catastrophically, wanted something he couldn't control. James started the car and drove home, knowing the only thing more dangerous than his obsession was what he'd do to keep it, and knowing with absolute certainty that he'd already crossed a line he could never uncross. Monday morning arrived with all the weight of inevitability. Alex stepped off the elevator at 7:15 a.m., 15 minutes earlier than usual because she hadn't slept. James's words from Friday still echoed in her head. Monday morning, my office. 7 a.m. Things are going to change. She'd spent the weekend alternating between anxiety and something she refused to name, had rehearsed professional responses to whatever change he had planned, had told herself that working for a former mafia enforcer meant adapting to unpredictability. But nothing prepared her for what she found. Her cubicle was gone. Not relocated. Not reorganized. Gone. The partition walls had been removed, the desk surface empty. Her files and laptop and the small succulent plant she'd kept for luck, all of it vanished like she'd never existed there at all. Alex's heart kicked into her throat. Miss Watson? She turned to find Naomi approaching, tablet in hand, expression professionally neutral in a way that suggested she'd been expecting this reaction. Where's my desk? Alex asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Mr. Kang requested a workspace modification over the weekend. Naomi gestured toward the corner office. Your new workstation is ready. He's expecting you. Alex looked at the glass-walled office where James Kang stood with his back to them, phone pressed to his ear, the city skyline stretching beyond him like a kingdom. I don't understand. It's a promotion, Naomi said carefully. You'll be working directly with Mr. Kang on high-level financial analysis. Congratulations. It wasn't a promotion. They both knew it. It was a cage. Alex's hands trembled as she walked toward his office. The door was open. Always open now, she'd learned. Because closed doors meant privacy, and privacy meant temptation neither of them could afford. James turned as she entered. He'd ended his call, and for a moment they just looked at each other. He wore charcoal gray today, the suit immaculate, his expression unreadable. Miss Watson. He gestured to a desk positioned across from his, close enough to see him clearly, far enough to maintain the illusion of professional distance. Your workspace. Her laptop sat waiting. Her files, neatly organized. Even the succulent, placed exactly where it had been in her cubicle. Sir, I don't. You're the best financial analyst we have, James interrupted, his voice smooth and absolute. The projects I'm developing require someone who understands our models intimately. You've been underutilized in that cubicle. This is where you should have been from the beginning. It was a perfect lie. Professionally justifiable. Completely hollow. Alex swallowed. And if I prefer my cubicle? Something flickered in his eyes' surprise. Maybe, that she'd challenge him. Then it was gone, replaced by that glacial control. You don't. He returned to his desk, sat down, opened his laptop. Your first assignment is on the shared drive. The Soul expansion requires comprehensive risk analysis. I need your initial assessment by end of day. Dismissed. Claimed. Trapped. Alex sat at her new desk and opened her laptop with shaking hands. Behind her, through the glass walls, she felt every eye on the 18th floor watching. The morning passed in excruciating awareness. Every time James shifted in his chair, Alex felt it. Every phone call he took in Korean, low, clipped, dangerous, made her hyper-conscious of the man across from her. Every time she stood to retrieve files from the cabinet, she felt his eyes track her movement even when he pretended to be reading contracts. The proximity was suffocating. At 10:30 a.m., she reached for the stapler at the exact moment he did. Their hands collided, his warm, scarred across the knuckles in ways expensive suits couldn't hide, hers smaller and trembling. They both froze. Sorry, Alex whispered. James pulled back like she'd burned him. Take it. She grabbed the stapler and returned to her desk, her pulse hammering so loud she was certain he could hear it. By noon, the entire office was whispering. Alex heard it during her bathroom break, two women from accounting huddled by the sinks, voices low but sharp with speculation. Moved her into his office. Never works directly with anyone. You saw what happened to Ryan Park. Alex washed her hands and left without making eye contact, but the damage was done. Everyone was watching. Everyone was guessing. And they weren't wrong. She grabbed lunch from downstairs, a salad she didn't want, and ate it at her new desk because leaving felt like retreat, and retreat felt like admission. James ate in the office too. Catered sushi from some restaurant she couldn't pronounce, eaten with precision while he reviewed documents. He didn't speak to her. Didn't acknowledge her presence beyond the occasional request for files or data. But the silence between them was louder than words. At 2 p.m., her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Heard you got promoted. Or imprisoned. Can't tell which. You okay, Ryan? Alex stared at the message, unsure how to respond. How had Ryan gotten her personal number? Why was he texting her after being escorted out by security twice? She typed a careful response. I'm fine. How did you get this number? The reply came quickly. It has its privileges. Seriously though, Watson. Be careful. Kang isn't known for subtle. Before she could respond, James spoke. Personal call? Alex's head snapped up. He was watching her, expression neutral but eyes sharp. Just a friend checking in. Ryan Park? James set down his pen with deliberate care. How did you... Your expression. He leaned back in his chair. You look guilty, which means it's someone you think I won't approve of. The air in the office went thin. It's none of your business, Alex said quietly, surprising herself. James stood. Slowly, deliberately. He walked around his desk and stopped 3 feet from hers, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Everything that happens on this floor is my business, he said, voice soft and lethal. Everyone who contacts my employees is my business. And everyone who texts you during work hours, Miss Watson, is absolutely my business. You moved me into your office, Alex said, finding courage she didn't know she had. You don't get to control who texts me, don't I? The challenge hung between them, electric and dangerous. James reached down slowly, giving her time to pull away, and plucked the phone from her hands. He glanced at the screen, at Ryan's message still visible, and something cold crossed his face. Mr. Park seems to have trouble following instructions. He handed the phone back. Block his number. Excuse me? Block his number. James leaned forward, hands braced on her desk, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. Or I'll have it do it for you. Your choice. You can't. I can. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I can do a lot of things, Alex. And if that man texts you again, you'll find out exactly how much. He'd used her first name. In 14 months, he'd never used her first name. The intimacy of it, the possession in his tone, made her breath catch. James straightened and returned to his desk like nothing had happened. The soul analysis. End of day. Alex sat frozen, her phone burning in her hand, her heart a wild thing trying to escape her chest. She blocked Ryan's number. Hated herself for it, but did it anyway. Because James Kang had just proven what she'd suspected since Tuesday. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was his. In ways that had nothing to do with employment contracts, and everything to do with the jealousy she'd seen carved across his face when he'd read that text. By 5 p.m., when most of the office began filtering toward the elevators, Alex was still working. The soul analysis was complex, requiring cross-referencing international regulations and currency fluctuations. She was deep in spreadsheets when James spoke again. You can finish tomorrow. I'm almost done. Alex. There it was again. Her name in his voice, intimate and commanding. She looked up. He was standing by the window, jacket off, sleeves rolled to his elbows, tattoos finally fully visible, Korean script and dragons and symbols she didn't understand, covering his forearms like beautiful, terribly poetry. Go home, he said quietly. Before I give this office something else to talk about. The warning was clear. The threat or promise hung in the air between them. Alex saved her work, packed her laptop, and fled. But as the elevator doors closed, she looked back through the glass walls and saw him standing at the window, watching her leave with an expression that looked like hunger and regret combined. She'd spent 14 months invisible. Now she was the most visible person in Pacific Crest Enterprises. And the most trapped. Because James Kang had moved her into his office, into his sight, into his control, and everyone knew it meant something more than a promotion. It meant she belonged to him now, whether she'd agreed to it or not. 3 weeks passed like slow torture wrapped in expensive suits and professional distance. Alex learned to breathe in the same room as James Kang, learned the rhythm of his phone calls, the specific tone he used when closing deals versus when he was speaking to people from his past, the latter always in Korean, always clipped, always followed by silence so heavy it pressed against her skin. She learned that he took coffee black, worked through lunch most days, and left his office exactly twice each afternoon, once at 2 p.m. for a security briefing with Min Jun, once at 4:30 p.m. for reasons he never explained. She learned that proximity didn't breed familiarity. It bred hunger. Every accidental touch passing files, reaching for the same document, his hand steadying her elbow when she stumbled over her laptop cord, felt like matches struck in a room full of gasoline. Dangerous. Inevitable. He never touched her deliberately. Never crossed the professional line he'd drawn when he'd moved her into his office. But his eyes did. His eyes touched her constantly, tracking her movements like she was something precious he was guarding. Or hunting. The office gossip had quieted after the first week, replaced by cautious avoidance. People stopped lingering near James's office, stopped asking Alex questions. She'd become untouchable by association, too close to power to approach safely. She should have hated it. Some days she did. But other days, when James looked up from his laptop and their eyes met across 4 feet of polished wood, she felt something else entirely. Recognition. Like they were the only 2 people in Los Angeles who understood that danger and desire weren't opposites. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Alex arrived at 7:30 a.m. with coffee, 2 cups now, because James had stopped pretending he didn't wait for her to bring him one. She rode the elevator alone, stepped onto the 18th floor, walked toward the glass-walled office that had become her entire world. Naomi intercepted her before she reached the door. Morning. This arrived for Mr. Kang. She handed Alex a manila envelope, unmarked except for his name printed in block letters. No return address. Courier delivered it an hour ago. Alex frowned. Why not give it to him directly? He's on a call with Seoul. Asked me to hold all deliveries. Naomi's expression flickered with something that might have been concern. But you should probably take that one in. The weight of the envelope felt wrong, too light for documents, too deliberate in its anonymity. Alex nodded and entered the office. James was standing at the window, phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Korean. His free hand was clenched at his side, the only tell that the conversation wasn't going well. He didn't turn when she entered, just raised one finger. Wait. She set his coffee on the desk and held the envelope, uncertain. 2 minutes later, James ended the call with a single word that sounded like a curse. He turned, saw her holding the package, and went completely still. Where did that come from? Courier. No return address. Alex extended it toward him. Naomi said. James crossed the distance in 3 strides and took the envelope. His jaw was tight, his eyes sharp in a way she'd only seen once before when Ryan had texted her. But this was different. This was fear. He opened the envelope with controlled precision, pulled out a single photograph, and stopped breathing. Alex watched the color drain from his face. Watched his hand tighten around the photo hard enough that it crumpled at the edges. Watched something cold and lethal slide over his expression like a mask clicking into place. James? She'd started using his first name in private 2 weeks ago. He'd never corrected her. He didn't respond. Just stared at the photograph like it was a death warrant. What is it? James finally looked at her, and the expression in his eyes made her stomach drop. Not anger, not violence, terror, raw and absolute. He handed her the photograph. It was her. Leaving her apartment building in mid-Wilshire yesterday morning, wearing the blue dress she'd had on. The angle suggested it had been taken from across the street, zoomed in, professional quality. She was smiling at something on her phone, completely unaware she was being watched. Alex turned it over with shaking hands. 2 words in red ink, written in Korean characters, and beneath them, translated into English in the same blood-red script. We know. The photograph slipped from her fingers. Sit down, James said quietly. Who? Sit. Down. His voice cracked with command. Alex sank into her chair. James moved to his desk, pulled open a drawer, and retrieved a gun matte black, lethal, familiar in his hands in a way that made it clear this wasn't the first time he'd held it. He checked the magazine, chambered around, and set it within reach. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed. Minjun, my office. Now, we have a problem. He ended the call and looked at Alex. Really looked at her like he was memorizing her face before something terrible happened. Do you know who I really am? He asked. I've heard rumors. The rumors are insufficient. James circled his desk slowly, a predator forced into explanation. Before Pacific Crest, before the hotels and real estate and legitimate business, I was an enforcer for the Jopak, Korean Mafia. I collected debts, eliminated problems. I did things that would make you run from this office and never look back. Alex's throat went dry. Why are you telling me this? Because they found you. He gestured at the photograph on the floor. My old life. The people I tried to leave behind when I built this empire. They don't let you leave. They let you think you've left, and then they remind you that blood money doesn't wash clean just because you launder it through real estate. Why would they target me? James stopped pacing. When he spoke, his voice fractured just slightly, just enough to reveal the man beneath the ice. Because I've been careless. He met her eyes. Because for 3 weeks I've looked at you like you matter. Because every person in this building, every criminal in Los Angeles who still has eyes on me, has watched me move you into my office and knows what that means. What does it mean? That you're mine. The words came out raw, possessive, undeniable. That I've claimed you without asking permission. That I've made you visible in a world where visibility is a target. The office felt too small suddenly, too exposed despite the glass walls. What do they want? Leverage, compliance, proof that I'm still the man I was, that I'll do what they need when they need it. James's hand flexed toward the gun. Or they want to punish me for trying to leave by taking away something I care about. Minjun burst through the door, took one look at the photograph on the floor, and cursed in Korean. How many? James asked. I'll have a team sweep her building within the hour. But if they got this close, then they can get closer. James turned to Alex. You're not going home tonight. Excuse me? Your apartment is compromised. You'll stay at my house in Hancock Park until we neutralize the threat. You can't just... I can. James moved toward her, crouching so they were eye level. Alex, listen to me. These people don't make threats. They make examples. That photograph is a promise. If I don't respond correctly, if I don't protect you, they will hurt you to hurt me. Why? Her voice broke. I'm nobody. I'm just a data analyst who—" "You're not nobody." James reached up slowly, telegraphing the movement, and cupped her face with one scarred hand. "You're the first person in 5 years who made me feel something other than control. You're the reason I've lost my mind over the past month. You're the only thing in Los Angeles that matters more than my empire." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "And that makes you the most valuable target in California." The truth crashed over her, the surveillance, the possessiveness, the way he'd demolished Ryan's career over a smile. It wasn't just attraction, it was obsession. And obsession in James Kang's world meant painting a target on anything he wanted. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I tried to keep my distance, tried to ignore you for 14 months because I knew if I ever really looked at you, this would happen." What would happen? This. And then James Kang kissed her. Not gently, not tentatively. He kissed her like drowning, like warfare, like every ounce of control he'd maintained for 3 weeks shattered against the reality that someone was threatening her because of him. His hand slid into her hair, angling her head back, and Alex gasped against his mouth. She should have pushed him away. Should have remembered Minjun standing there, the photograph on the floor, the danger crystallizing around them. Instead, she kissed him back. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and James made a sound low in his throat, hunger and relief and something that sounded like pain. The kiss deepened, desperate and claiming, his other hand finding her waist and pulling her up from the chair so they were pressed together. No space, no barriers, just heat and fear, and the inevitable collision they'd been racing toward since Tuesday. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, James rested his forehead against hers. "I'll keep you safe," he said against her lips. "Whatever it costs, whoever I have to kill. You're mine now, Alex, and I protect what's mine." Behind them, Minjun cleared his throat diplomatically. "Boss, we need to move. Now." James pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "Do you trust me?" Alex looked at this man, this former enforcer, this criminal dressed as CEO, this dangerous obsessive who'd just confessed he'd destroy anyone who touched her, and knew the answer would change everything. Yes. His smile was sharp and possessive and absolutely terrifying. "Then let's go to war." James Kang's house in Hancock Park wasn't what Alex expected. No penthouse, no cold modern architecture. Instead, a 3-story craftsman home tucked behind old oak trees, the kind of house that whispered old Los Angeles money. Except the security cameras were military grade, the windows were bulletproof, and the man leading her through the front door carried a gun like it was part of his anatomy. Minjun had swept her apartment for surveillance, found 2 cameras and a GPS tracker on her car, and recommended she not return for at least a week, maybe longer. James hadn't argued. Had simply driven her here in a black Mercedes with tinted windows while 2 SUVs full of security followed. Now, at 8 p.m., Alex stood in his home office, wood-paneled walls, leather furniture, a desk that looked antique but probably cost more than her annual salary, and tried to process that her life had detonated in the span of 6 hours. "You should eat something," James said, returning from the kitchen with 2 glasses of water. He'd changed out of his suit into dark jeans and a black t-shirt that revealed the full extent of his tattoos. Dragons coiled up both arms, Korean script wrapped around his biceps, symbols she couldn't read inked across skin that told stories he'd never shared. "I'm not hungry. Alex. Don't." She turned to face him. "Don't tell me to eat or rest or pretend this is normal. Someone photographed me. You kissed me. And now I'm in your house because going home means dying. So please don't ask me to be okay." James set the water down carefully. "Fair enough." They stood in silence, the weight of everything unsaid pressing between them. Finally, Alex gestured at the ledgers spread across his desk. "You said you were reviewing shell companies? Tracking money flows. Trying to figure out which faction sent that photograph." He moved to the desk, his soldier's instinct never fully at rest even here. "But you don't have to." "I need to do something," Alex interrupted. "Something that isn't panicking. So teach me what I'm looking at." James studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right." They worked side by side for 2 hours, Alex learning to read the coded ledgers that tracked James's transition from criminal empire to legitimate business. He explained patiently how to spot laundered money, which shell companies were fronts, which business partners were actually enforcers in expensive suits. It should have been terrifying. Instead, it felt strangely intimate, domestic almost. 2 people reviewing paperwork in comfortable silence, shoulders occasionally brushing, his hand steadying the documents when she reached across. Like this was normal. like they did this every night. At 10:47 p.m., Alex looked up from a particularly complex offshore account structure. If they wanted leverage, why threaten? Why not just take me? James's pen stopped moving. Because that's not how the Jopak operates. They need me to know it's coming. Need me to make choices, comply or resist. The photograph was the opening move. What's the next move? Depends on how I respond. He met her eyes. If I give them what they want, you're safe. If I refuse, the window exploded. Glass shattered inward in a spray of crystalline violence. Alex screamed. James moved fast, fluid, pure instinct, grabbing her wrist and pulling her down behind the desk as bullets punched through the space where they'd been standing. "Stay down," he shouted, already reaching for the gun holstered at his back. More windows shattered. Front door, kitchen. They'd come from multiple entry points. Professional, coordinated, meant to overwhelm. James crouched beside her, his hand cupping the back of her head, pressing her face against his chest. "How many?" he called out in Korean. "6 confirmed." Minjun's voice crackled through the security system. "Coming in fast. I'm 3 minutes out." 3 minutes. An eternity. "Closet," James ordered, pointing to a door across the office. "Lock it. Take this." He pressed his phone into her hands, encrypted, already open to a direct line. "If anything happens to me, Minjun's the first contact. Tell him everything. James. Go. Now." She ran. Dove into the closet, cedar-lined, large enough for a person, secure enough to buy time, and locked it from inside just as the office door burst open. Through the slats she saw them. 2 men in tactical gear, moving like soldiers, professionals, killers. James stepped into view, gun raised, expression colder than she'd ever seen. No CEO, no businessman, just the enforcer he'd been, reborn. "You made a mistake coming here," he said in Korean. The first man fired. James moved impossibly fast, the bullet missing by inches. His return shot didn't miss. The man dropped, blood spreading across hardwood. The second man charged. Hand to hand, brutal and efficient. James blocked, countered, drove his elbow into the attacker's throat. The man gurgled, fell. James put 2 bullets in him to be sure. More footsteps. More men. James reloaded, his movements mechanical, trained. "Kang!" A voice from the hallway. "We don't want you. Just the girl. Give her up and this ends." "You touch her, you die," James called back. "Everyone who sent you dies. I'll burn your families, your operations, everything you've ever built. We know you care about her. That's why we're here." 3 men entered simultaneously through the door, through the shattered window. James took down the first with a headshot. The second got close enough to grapple. They fought vicious, close-quarters combat that destroyed furniture and left blood on the walls. James won. Knife to the ribs, quick and lethal. But the third man had an angle. Alex saw it through the slats, saw the gun raise, saw James's focus on the dying man in his hands. She screamed his name. James turned. Too late. The bullet caught him in the shoulder, left side, high. He staggered, fired back on instinct. The third man dropped. Silence. Terrible, ringing silence. James stood in the center of his destroyed office, bleeding, surrounded by bodies. His gun arm trembled, his left shoulder bloomed red, blood soaking through his shirt in spreading darkness. "Alex," he said, voice strained. "It's clear. Come out." She burst from the closet, ran to him, her hands hovering over the wound without knowing how to help. "You're shot. Grazed. Mostly." He swayed slightly. "Minjun?" As if summoned, Minjun crashed through the front door with 4 security personnel, guns drawn. He took in the carnage, the bodies, James's shoulder. "Ambulance is 2 minutes out," Minjun said, already moving toward them. "How bad?" "I'll live." James's eyes found Alex. "They didn't touch her?" "No one touched me," Alex confirmed, her voice breaking. "But you—" Her hands were shaking. His blood stained her fingers where she'd tried to stop the bleeding. James caught her wrist gently. "I'm fine. This isn't my first bullet." Sirens wailed in the distance. Red and blue lights painted the street outside. Minjun barked orders into his phone while his team secured the perimeter, checked the bodies. When the paramedics arrived, James refused the stretcher. Walked to the ambulance under his own power, Alex's hand clutched in his uninjured one. They tried to separate them for the ride to the hospital. James's expression made them reconsider. In the ambulance, Alex sat beside the gurney while a paramedic worked on his shoulder. The bullet had gone through clean exit, they said. Lucky, they said. An inch lower, and it would have hit the subclavian artery. James's hand found hers, blood slick but steady. Tell them you're mine, he said, voice rough with pain and something fiercer. When we get to the hospital, when the police ask questions, when anyone asks anything, tell them you're mine, that we're together, that I was protecting my girlfriend from a home invasion. James, it's the only way I can protect you. His grip tightened. If you're just an employee, you're a target. If you're mine publicly, undeniably mine, anyone who touches you signs their death warrant. The entire underworld needs to know that hurting you means war. Alex looked at this man bleeding in an ambulance, because he'd killed 5 people to keep her safe, and felt something shift irrevocably. I'm yours, she whispered. His eyes closed briefly, relief washing over his face. Say it again. I'm yours, James King. And you're mine. When he smiled, it was sharp and possessive and absolutely devastating. Then let them come. Let the whole city know. You're untouchable now. The ambulance doors opened at Cedars-Sinai. Cameras flashed news crews already circling the story of a prominent CEO involved in a shooting. Police waited with questions. Hospital staff swarmed with clipboards and procedures. But before they wheeled James away, he pulled Alex down for a kiss, blood-stained, desperate, witnessed by every camera and cop and curious onlooker. Mine, he said against her lips. And the invisible woman became the most visible person in Los Angeles, protected by the most dangerous man in California, claimed in blood and bullets and a love that looked like warfare. She'd wanted to disappear. Instead, James Kang had made her untouchable. And that, she was learning, was far more terrifying. The club had no name on the door. Just an address in downtown Los Angeles, a building that looked abandoned from the street, its windows dark, its entrance unmarked. But behind reinforced steel and biometric locks, the interior gleamed, mahogany walls, crystal chandeliers, leather booths that had witnessed 50 years of deals made in blood and money. This was where the real power in California met, when boardrooms and courtrooms weren't sufficient. Alex stood in the private elevator ascending to the 3rd floor, her hand clasped in James's uninjured one, and tried to control her breathing. 3 days had passed since the home invasion. 3 days of police interviews she'd navigated with carefully scripted answers. 3 days of living in James's guest room while contractors repaired his office and removed bloodstains from hardwood floors. 3 days of watching him move through his home with his left arm in a black sling, his shoulder bandaged, his eyes calculating something she couldn't yet see. Until this morning, when he'd told her what came next. I'm calling a meeting, he'd said over coffee, his voice matter-of-fact despite the gravity. Every major faction in Southern California. Korean syndicates, Armenian crews, the Mexican cartels that control the ports. Everyone who matters. Why? To make you untouchable. Now, as the elevator opened onto a private floor that smelled of expensive cigars and older violence, Alex understood what that meant. They weren't alone. Minjun flanked James's right side, his hand resting casually near his concealed weapon. 2 more security personnel men Alex recognized from the Hancock Park house took positions by the elevator, and waiting in the main room beyond. Alex's breath caught. 20 men, maybe 25, seated around a massive conference table. Korean faces she didn't recognize, Armenian names she'd heard whispered in James's phone calls. Hispanic men whose suits couldn't quite hide the violence beneath. All of them powerful, all of them dangerous. All of them watching as James Kang entered with a woman on his arm and murder in his eyes. The conversations died instantly. James walked to the head of the table not quickly, not showing weakness despite the sling, and Alex walked with him. She wore the navy dress he'd bought her yesterday, simple but elegant, a conscious choice to look professional despite the circumstances. Her heels clicked against marble floor, each step echoing in the silence. When they reached the head of the table, James released her hand and turned to face the room. Thank you for coming, he said in English first, then repeated it in Korean. His voice carried the weight of command, the absolute certainty of a man who'd once killed for these people and now owned more legitimate power than most of them combined. A man at the far end spoke older, Korean, his face carved with scars. You called an emergency gathering. We came. Explain. James's jaw tightened. 3 nights ago, 6 men invaded my home. They came for her. He gestured to Alex. They failed. I killed 5 of them. The 6th died en route to the hospital. Murmurs rippled through the room. Someone whispered in Armenian, another in Spanish. "We heard," a younger man said, one of the Armenian crew, his accent thick. "We also heard you're claiming it was random, home invasion." "It wasn't random," James's voice cut through the speculation like steel through flesh. "Someone sent them. Someone decided to test whether I'd protect what's mine. Someone thought they could use her as leverage. And..." The older Korean man leaned forward. "What do you want from us, Kang? Sympathy? We all have vulnerabilities. I want clarity." James's hand flexed at his side, the injured one, the reminder of what this cost. "I want every person in this room, every organization you represent, every soldier who takes your orders, to understand one fundamental truth." He turned slightly, extending his uninjured hand toward Alex. She took it, stepped closer, feeling every eye in the room dissect her presence. "This is Alex Watson," James announced, his voice resonating with absolute authority. "She's under my protection. She's mine, my partner, my woman, the person I would burn this entire city to keep safe." The room went utterly still. "Anyone who touches her," James continued, his voice dropping to something colder, more lethal. "Anyone who threatens her, looks at her wrong, breathes near her with intent, I will erase from existence. Not quickly. Not mercifully. I will dismantle their operations piece by piece. I will destroy their families. I will make them regret the day they thought they could use her against me." Alex felt the weight of it, every pair of eyes shifting from curiosity to calculation, measuring her, measuring what she meant to James Kang, measuring whether this declaration was weakness or the most dangerous thing he'd ever done. A man at the middle of the table spoke Hispanic, older, with the bearing of someone who controlled territories, not just crews. "You're making her a target, Kang, publicly claiming she matters." "No," James's voice was absolute. "I'm making her untouchable. There's a difference." "Is there?" The question came from a younger Korean man, his tone skeptical. "You're showing your hand, admitting vulnerability." "I'm drawing a line." James released Alex's hand only to step closer to her, his presence a shield. "She's not leverage. She's not a weakness to exploit. She's the reason I will go to war without hesitation. And that makes her the most dangerous person in this room, because hurting her guarantees total destruction." The older Korean man studied them both for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. "You've changed, Kang. The enforcer I knew wouldn't have claimed anyone publicly. The enforcer you knew didn't have anything worth protecting," James replied. "Now I do, and I'm making it clear. Anyone who sent those men, anyone planning a second attempt, anyone who thinks they can pressure me through her, you've already lost." Silence stretched taut as wire. Finally, the older Korean man stood. He bowed slightly, not submission, but acknowledgement. "Understood. The Lee family will spread the word. Your woman is off limits." One by one, others stood. The Armenian representative nodded. The Mexican cartel liaison spoke briefly in Spanish, then switched to English. "She's protected. Our people will know." Not everyone looked pleased. A few faces remained skeptical, calculating whether this declaration created opportunity rather than deterrence. But enough power in the room had acknowledged James's claim that the others would follow out of respect, out of fear, out of the understanding that James Kang had just raised the stakes to mutual annihilation. When the last acknowledgement came, James turned to Alex. His expression softened fractionally, still dangerous, still possessive, but something warmer beneath. "We're done here." They walked out together, Min-jun clearing the path, security flanking. The elevator doors closed on a room full of predators who'd just learned that one of their own had found something worth dying for. In the elevator, descending toward ground level and the waiting Mercedes, Alex finally spoke. "You just painted a target on me," she whispered. "Every person in that room knows I matter to you now." James pulled her close with his good arm, his mouth near her ear. "No, I just made you untouchable. There's a difference." "Is there?" She echoed the question from upstairs, her voice trembling. "Yes." He tipped her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. "A target means they hunt you. Untouchable means hunting you guarantees their death. Most of those men are survivors, Alex. They've lived this long by knowing which battles to fight. And I just made it clear, you're the battle they'll lose. What about the ones who aren't smart? The ones who see challenge instead of warning?" James's smile was sharp, lethal, absolutely certain. "Then I'll kill them. Publicly, brutally. And the next person who doubts me will learn from their mistake." The elevator doors opened onto the parking garage, Their security detail had the car running, doors open, the area swept. Before they climbed in, Alex stopped him. Why? Why risk everything for someone you ignored for 14 months? James cupped her face with his uninjured hand, his thumb brushing her cheekbone with unexpected gentleness. Because ignoring you was the only way I could keep you safe from myself, he said quietly. Because the moment I really saw you, I knew you'd be my undoing. And because 3 nights ago when they came for you, I learned something. What? That losing my empire would hurt, but losing you would destroy me. His forehead touched hers. So I'll protect the empire by making the world understand. You're not my weakness. You're my line in the sand. Cross it, and there's no going back. Alex closed her eyes, feeling the weight of his declaration, the burden of being loved by someone whose love looked like warfare. I was invisible for so long, she whispered. You'll never be invisible again, James promised. And that's the price of loving me. Visibility, danger, the knowledge that every criminal in California now knows your face. What if I'm not strong enough for this? He kissed her then soft, despite the violence still humming through his body, tender despite the threats he'd just made. You stood beside me in that room, he said against her lips, terrified but unflinching. You're already stronger than you know. They drove back to Hancock Park in silence, security following, the city spreading golden and dangerous around them. And Alex realized that James had been right. She wasn't a target anymore. She was untouchable. The most visible, protected, dangerous by association woman in Los Angeles because James Kang had just declared war on anyone who thought otherwise. And somehow, impossibly, that felt safer than 14 months of being invisible ever had. Peace, Alex learned, was a myth people told themselves to sleep at night. 2 weeks after James's declaration, the war didn't end. It just went underground. The FBI came first. Special Agent Rebecca Torres, mid-40s, sharp suit, sharper eyes. She arrived at Pacific Crest Enterprises on a Thursday morning with questions about the home invasion that left 5 men dead and a prominent CEO injured. Alex sat beside James in the conference room, Min-jun flanking them like a silent threat, while Agent Torres laid out photographs of the bodies. Professional analysis, ballistic reports, questions that danced around what she really wanted to know, whether James Kang had executed men in his home or legitimately defended himself. 5 assailants, Torres said, her tone neutral but weighted. All with criminal records, Korean nationals, 3 of them. Interesting coincidence. Self-defense isn't coincidence, James replied, his voice smooth as silk over steel. It's survival. You're a very good shot for a CEO. I'm a very cautious man in a dangerous world. Torres's eyes shifted to Alex. And you, Miss Watson? You witnessed the entire event? I was locked in a closet, Alex said, keeping her voice steady despite the memories that still woke her at 3 a.m. I heard gunfire. When it stopped, James was bleeding and they were dead. Convenient positioning. Strategic positioning, James corrected coldly. I protected her. That's what you do for people you love. The word hung in the air, love deliberate and public, and exactly what James intended. Building the narrative, making Alex's presence in his home, in his life, unquestionable. Torres closed her folder. We'll be in touch if we have further questions. I'm sure you will be, James said, standing. Min-jun will show you out. When the FBI left, Alex turned to James. She doesn't believe us. She doesn't have to believe us. She has to prove otherwise. His shoulder had healed enough to lose the sling, but she could see him favor it slightly. And she can't, because the story is legally airtight, even if morally complicated. Is that what we're calling it? Morally complicated? James's expression darkened. That's what we're calling staying alive. The FBI wasn't the only problem. Rivals who'd heard about the meeting, who'd witnessed James's public claim, started testing boundaries. Small provocations at first, shipments delayed at the ports James's companies used, permits mysteriously held up at City Hall, whispers in the financial press about questionable business associations. Nothing overtly criminal, nothing James could retaliate against without looking paranoid. But Alex saw the strain. Watched him take calls at midnight in Korean, his voice dropping to that lethal quiet that meant someone was about to lose something. Watched security double at Pacific Crest, Min-jun's team expanding from 4 to 12. Watched the walls go higher around Hancock Park, literal walls, reinforced and topped with security measures she didn't want to understand. James was building a fortress, but emotionally, he was hemorrhaging. She'd catch him watching her sometimes across the dinner table, in the morning when she emerged from the guest room, late at night when they sat in his study pretending to work. His eyes held something raw and desperate that the ice-cold CEO would never allow. Like he was memorizing her. Like he expected her to disappear. "I'm still here," she'd say softly. "For now," he'd reply. And then return to his calls, his ledgers, his constant calculation of threats she couldn't see. They hadn't slept together. Not since the kiss in his office, the one in the ambulance, the careful touches that kept them tethered but separate. Alex still occupied the guest room, luxurious and lonely, while James slept down the hall behind a door that stayed closed. Proximity without intimacy. Protection without possession. It was driving them both insane. 3 weeks after the declaration, Alex woke at 2 a.m. to voices downstairs. She'd been having nightmares, glass shattering, gunfire, blood spreading across hardwood, and sleep had become unreliable. She pulled on a robe and padded barefoot down the stairs, following the sound. James's study door was cracked open. Light spilled into the hallway. His voice, low and deadly, spoke in Korean. Alex stopped just outside, hidden in shadow. She didn't speak Korean, but she caught names, caught the cadence of command, caught Minjun's replies. And then, clear as crystal in English, "No bodies in the river this time. I want them to find what's left." Silence. Then James again. "Make it public. Make it clear what happens when someone tests me." Alex's hand flew to her mouth, stifling the gasp. This wasn't defense. This was retribution. This was the man James had been before Pacific Crest. Before the suits and the boardrooms, the enforcer who killed without hesitation and made examples of those who crossed him. She backed away slowly, retreating to her room before he could discover her listening. But sleep was impossible now. She lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. I want them to find what's left. The man who kissed her tenderly, who brought her coffee exactly how she liked it, who'd killed 5 people to protect her. That same man had just ordered someone's death like he was approving a business contract. By morning, Alex had made a decision. She found James in the kitchen at 6 a.m., already dressed, already reviewing something on his tablet. He looked up when she entered, his expression softening the way it only did for her. "Couldn't sleep?" "I heard your call last night," she said. His face went carefully blank. "Which call?" "The one where you ordered someone killed." Her voice shook despite her effort to control it. "The one about bodies in rivers and making examples." James set down his tablet slowly. "You should have stayed in your room." "I should have stayed invisible," Alex shot back. "I should have kept my head down and never laughed at Ryan Park's jokes. I should have—" "Alex, who are you?" The question burst out of her, raw and desperate. "Are you the man who bought me this robe because you noticed I was cold? Or the man who orders executions over breakfast?" "I'm both." James stood, his movements controlled despite the tension radiating from him. "I've always been both. You knew that. Knowing and hearing are different." "Then what do you want me to say?" His voice rose fractionally, not anger, but something closer to anguish. "That I'm not dangerous? I am. That I don't make people disappear when they threaten what's mine? I do. That loving you has made me soft?" He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides, his hands framing her face with unexpected gentleness. "Loving you has made me more lethal," he said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Because now, I have something to lose. Now every threat against you, every whisper about using you for leverage, every rival who thinks they can test me through you, I will destroy them without hesitation, without mercy, without the restraint I used to maintain." "That's not love," Alex whispered. "That's obsession. In my world, they're the same thing." His thumb brushed her cheekbone, the gesture achingly tender despite his words. "I'd burn this city before I lose you. Level it. Turn it to ash and rubble. And I wouldn't lose a moment of sleep." The truth of it settled between them, heavy, inescapable, terrifying. "The bodies in the river," Alex said. "Who were they?" "People who tried to kidnap you from Pacific Crest yesterday." His eyes held hers. "Minjun's team intercepted them in the parking garage. We couldn't let them walk away with intelligence about your patterns, your security, your vulnerabilities. So you killed them. I protected you." He said it like there was no difference. Like those 2 things were identical in his moral calculus. Alex pulled back, putting space between them, needing to think without his hands on her skin, his voice in her ear. "I can't live like this," she said. "Never knowing when you'll cross a line, never knowing if the man I love is the CEO or the killer." "They're the same man, Alex." James's hands fell to his sides, his expression hardening. "I tried to warn you, tried to keep you at a distance for 14 months because I knew. If you ever really saw me, saw all of me, you'd have to make this choice. What choice? Stay or leave? His voice cracked fractionally. Love me anyway, or run while you still can. She stared at him, this man who'd transformed her life from invisible monotony to visible danger, who'd killed for her, who'd declared war for her, who'd just admitted he'd burn Los Angeles to keep her safe. The smart choice was obvious. Pack her things, call her family, disappear into a new city, new name, new life. But Alex had stopped making smart choices the moment she'd fallen in love with James Kang. If I stay, she said slowly, I'm complicit. Every person you kill to protect me, every line you cross, every law you break, I become part of it. Yes, if I leave, you'll probably get yourself killed trying to protect a ghost. Probably. And if I stay but ask you to stop to choose legitimate business, to let the authorities handle threats, to be the man you're pretending to be, James's smile was sad and sharp, then I'd be lying to you. And I won't do that. I kill, Alex. I eliminate threats. I operate in shadows while living in glass towers. That's who I am. That's who I'll always be. Why? She moved closer. Why can't you just let it go? Build something clean? Because clean doesn't keep you alive. His voice turned fierce. The FBI is investigating me. 3 rival factions are testing my boundaries. Someone in my old organization sent that photograph, and I still don't know who. If I play by legitimate rules, if I trust the system, you die. And I can't. I won't survive that. The raw honesty of it, the desperation beneath his control, broke something in Alex. She closed the distance between them and kissed him. Not gently, not questioning. She kissed him like acceptance, like surrender, like jumping off a cliff and trusting he'd catch her even if catching her meant drowning together. James made a sound against her mouth, relief and hunger, and something that sounded like pain. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her close, and when they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. I'm staying, Alex whispered. But not because I approve, not because I think you're right. I'm staying because loving you, really loving you, means accepting all of you. The CEO and the killer. The man who brings me coffee, and the man who orders executions. That makes you either brave or insane. Both, she said, echoing his earlier words. Definitely both. James laughed short, sharp, disbelieving. You should run. I know. This won't get easier. It'll get harder, more dangerous, more lines I'll cross. I know that too. He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. Why? Why stay when you know what I am? Alex touched his face, tracing the sharp line of his jaw. Because the only thing more dangerous than your world is being loved by you, and I'd rather face that danger beside you than spend the rest of my life wondering what we could have been. That's the most terrifying thing you've ever said. Good. Her smile was tremulous but real. Then we're even, because you terrify me every single day. I'm sorry. Don't. She cut him off. Don't apologize for being who you are. Just promise me one thing. Anything. Don't lie to me. Ever. No matter how ugly the truth is. James nodded slowly. I promise. No lies. No pretty versions of reality. Just the truth, bloody and complicated, and ours. Ours, Alex repeated, and realized that word meant something different now. Not just partnership. Not just love. But complicity. Alliance. 2 people bound together in a world where violence was currency and protection meant destruction. She'd been invisible once. Now she was the most dangerous thing in James Kang's life, not because she made him weak, but because she made him willing to destroy everything to keep her. And that, she was learning, was its own kind of power. Terrifying, intoxicating, inevitable. The war within had ended. The war around them had just begun. 6 weeks after Alex Watson chose to stay, Los Angeles bloomed into early autumn golden light, softening the city's sharp edges, the Pacific turning sapphire under clearer skies. The FBI closed their investigation. Insufficient evidence to contradict the self-defense narrative, Agent Torres had said, her eyes promising this wasn't over but her hands legally tied. The rivals who'd tested James's boundaries went quiet. 3 of them disappeared entirely, not bodies in rivers, but sudden retirements, relocations, strategic exits that spoke to conversations Alex wasn't privy to and didn't ask about. Pacific Crest Enterprises thrived. Stock prices climbed. Acquisitions closed. James's empire expanded while he maintained the careful fiction that he was nothing more than a brilliant, ruthless CEO. And Alex learned to live in the space between truth and performance. She returned to work not to her old cubicle, but to James's office where she belonged now. The whispers had evolved from scandalized to envious. She was the woman who'd survived being claimed by James Kang. The one who stood beside him during an FBI investigation and emerged unscathed. The one he looked at like she was the only real thing in his carefully constructed world. They still hadn't slept together. A choice James made deliberately. Alex understood, waiting for something official. Something that declared to the world what he'd already declared to the underworld. Tonight, that would change. The same club. The same unmarked door in downtown Los Angeles. But this time, when Alex stepped off the elevator in a red dress, the color of danger, of love, of the first day James had truly seen her, the atmosphere was different. Not threatening, celebratory. The same players occupied the massive conference table, but champagne replaced the tension. The older Korean man she'd learned his name was Mr. Lee smiled when he saw them enter. The Armenian representative stood in acknowledgement. Even the Mexican cartel liaison, who'd been skeptical 6 weeks ago, nodded with something approaching respect. James led her to the head of the table, his hand warm and steady on the small of her back. He wore black tonight suit, perfectly tailored, his Patek Philippe catching chandelier light. But it was his expression that arrested her. Open, almost vulnerable. The control finally cracked wide enough to show what lived beneath. He loved her, completely, irrevocably, and he was about to make it permanent. "Thank you for coming," James began, his voice carrying the authority she'd grown accustomed to. "6 weeks ago, I stood here and drew a line, made it clear that Alex Watson was under my protection, untouchable." Murmurs of agreement. Everyone remembered. "Tonight, I'm here to make a different announcement." He turned to Alex, his hand finding hers. "Not a threat, not a warning, a declaration of peace on my own terms." The room went quiet, expectant. James's thumb brushed across her knuckles once, twice, and then he spoke words that made the entire room shift. "This is Alex Kang," he said, his voice steady but softer than his usual command. "My wife in every way that matters. The woman who chose to stand beside me knowing exactly what that choice costs. The person who made me remember that power without humanity is just a prettier word for damnation." Alex's breath caught. He'd warned her this was coming, but hearing it, hearing her name attached to his, hearing him claim her not with threats but with vulnerability, undid something in her chest. Mr. Lee stood first, raising his glass. "To Alex Kang, may your love be stronger than our violence." One by one they stood. The Armenians, the Mexicans, every faction that controlled territory in Southern California, acknowledging not just James's claim but Alex's choice, toasting to something none of them probably believed in. Love that survived in a world built on blood. When the glasses clinked and the champagne flowed, James leaned close to Alex's ear. "Last chance to run," he whispered. "I'm exactly where I want to be," she replied. His smile was devastating. "Then let's go home." They left amid congratulations and promises of alliance, Min-jun clearing their path, security flanking. But this time, instead of the Hancock Park House, James directed the driver toward downtown, toward the Pacific Crest building, rising 40 stories into the evening sky. "Where are we going?" Alex asked. "Somewhere I've never taken anyone." His hand remained laced with hers. "The place I go when the weight of everything becomes too much." The elevator ascended past the 18th floor, past the office where this had all begun, to the 40th, the executive penthouse, James's private sanctuary. The doors opened onto floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Los Angeles. The city spread beneath them like a constellation light stretching to the horizon, the Pacific dark and infinite beyond. Minimalist furniture, a bar with bottles that cost more than cars, and silence. Perfect, complete silence. "I bought this building 5 years ago," James said, guiding her to the windows. "Stood here on the first night and looked at the city I'd bled for, killed for, built an empire in, and felt nothing. Just cold calculation about what came next." He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her waist. "Then you laughed at Ryan Park's terrible joke, and everything changed." His voice dropped, intimate and raw. "You were invisible because I wanted you safe, because some part of me knew that if I ever looked at you, really looked at you, I wouldn't be able to look away. And men like me don't get to want things without destroying them." "You didn't destroy me," Alex said softly. "I tried." His laugh was bitter. "Moved you into my office, made you visible, painted the biggest target imaginable on your back. All because I couldn't control my jealousy for 5 seconds. James, let me finish." He cupped her face, his touch reverent. I spent 6 weeks waiting for you to realize what I am, what I'll always be, waiting for you to run. And instead you stayed. You chose this, chose me, knowing I'd never be the man who plays by rules or seeks redemption or becomes something clean. I don't want clean, Alex said. I want real, and you're the most real thing I've ever known. That's terrifying. Good. She smiled, echoing their earlier conversation. Then we're still even. James kissed her, then slow, deliberate, nothing like the desperate collisions they'd shared before. This was promise. This was forever. This was a man who'd killed dozens, surrendering to the one person who made him want to be better, even if he never would be. When they broke apart, Los Angeles glowed below them, witness to everything they'd become. You didn't lose control, Alex whispered, her forehead against his. You found something worth losing it for. Alex Kang, he said, testing the name, making it real. How does it sound? Like home. She pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. Like choosing you every day, knowing what it costs. Like deciding that love in your world is scarier than anything I left behind. We'll have to make it legal eventually. Courthouse, paperwork, all the things that make it binding. I know. You'll be married to a man the FBI watches, who has bodies buried in his past and probably his future, who will never stop being dangerous. I know that too. James's smile was sharp and soft simultaneously, the duality she'd learned to love. Then welcome to the Empire, Mrs. Kang. Try not to let it kill you. Try not to let your obsession with protecting me start a war. No promises. She laughed, that same genuine laugh that had started everything. And James Kang, former enforcer, current CEO, the most dangerous man in Los Angeles, looked at her like she'd invented light. They moved away from the windows eventually, toward the bedroom that had never been used because James only came here to think, to plan, to escape. But tonight, it would become something else. The beginning of whatever came next. Hours later, when Los Angeles had quieted and the city lights dimmed toward dawn, Alex stood at the window wrapped in James's shirt. He joined her, pulling her back against his chest, his arms circling her waist. Regrets? He asked. About 100. She leaned into him. But none about you. That's the most dangerous thing you've ever admitted. Then I'm learning from the right person. Below them, Los Angeles stretched infinite and indifferent, the city that had watched a man built on blood become human for a woman who'd been invisible. The city that would witness whatever came next. Love that looked like warfare, protection that required destruction. Two people who chose each other knowing the cost. I love you, James said against her hair. Simple, absolute. I know. Alex turned in his arms. You killed 5 people to prove it. I'd kill 500. I know that too. She kissed him softly. That's why I'm staying. Forever? Or until one of us dies violently, whichever comes first. His laugh was surprised and genuine. You're terrible at romance. I learned from the best. The sun rose over the Pacific, turning the city gold, the same gold that had painted Pacific Crest Enterprises on that first Tuesday when everything changed. When James Kang had looked up from his empire and seen Alex Watson laughing at someone else's joke, when invisibility had shattered, when obsession had bloomed, when a man who'd spent his life controlling everything had finally, catastrophically, found something he couldn't control and loved it anyway. Los Angeles glowed beneath them, indifferent and eternal. And in the highest tower overlooking the city, 2 people who should never have collided stood wrapped together, choosing love despite the cost. She was no longer invisible. He was no longer invincible. And somehow, impossibly, that made them untouchable. The woman in red and the man in black, writing their ending in a city built on broken rules. Together, always. And that's where we end tonight. If this story moved you, or reminded you of something you once felt, click subscribe, like, and leave your heart in the comments below. Your words are the heartbeat of this channel. Until we meet again, keep your heart soft and your spirit strong.